In May 1955, representatives from 7 Eastern European nations gathered in Warsaw, Poland, to sign a pact with their superpower neighbor, the Soviet Union. The year's main event would establish Soviet control of the region and challenge the alliance of capitalist nations in the West. The United States and Western Europe had previously signed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, and now the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe were signing the Warsaw Pact. The Soviet Union started building the so-called Eastern Bloc soon after the Second World War. With Soviet assistance, communist-dominated governments gained power in nations including Hungary, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. Although these countries were officially independent, they were subject to Soviet political and military influence. In 1949, nations in Western Europe had signed a military alliance with the United States and Canada, and this treaty had established NATO. When in 1955 West Germany was also incorporated into NATO, the Soviet Union saw it as a threat to their foreign policy. They were intent on preventing the resurgence of a powerful German nation, particularly one that was allied to America. To counter this threat, the Soviet Union gathered its allies together to sign a military alliance of their own, and so began the Warsaw Pact. After a 3-day conference in Warsaw, the Treaty on Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Assistance was signed on May 14, 1955. Representatives from Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland and Romania signed the treaty with the Soviet Union. The members agreed to defend each other in the event of an outside military attack. The treaty stated that relations among the signatories were based on mutual non-interference in internal affairs and respect for national sovereignty and independence. Despite this condition, the Warsaw Pact became a mechanism for keeping member nations, who would become known as satellite states, under Soviet political and military leadership. The treaty reinforced Soviet status as a world superpower, on equal footing with its Cold War adversary, the United States. It enabled the Soviets to harness the powers of its allies' military and legitimize the presence of Soviet forces in Eastern Europe. When Hungary tried to extricate itself from the treaty in 1956, Soviet forces moved to crush the uprising. In August 1968, the Warsaw Pact was invoked when forces of the USSR, Poland, Hungary, East Germany and Bulgaria invaded Czechoslovakia. The Czech government had begun lifting restraints on freedom of expression and had sought closer relations with the West. The military invasion was used to curb these so-called imperialistic tendencies. Satellite states soon learned that withdrawing from the Warsaw Pact and achieving independence from Soviet control were unrealistic goals, and they aimed instead at establishing a greater measure of autonomy within the alliance. During the 1980s, the power of the Soviet Union began to wane, and by 1989, citizens were calling for the end of communist rule. Democratic revolutions took place throughout Eastern Europe. Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and Bulgaria announced that they would withdraw from the Warsaw Treaty from the 1st of July 1991. Fellow member Albania had withdrawn in 1968. At a meeting in Prague on the 1st of July 1991, the Warsaw Pact was officially dissolved. Deployed Soviet troops were gradually withdrawn from Eastern Europe, and the satellite states gradually returned to independence. When the main event of 1955 happened, none of the members that signed the Treaty on Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Assistance could have imagined that the Soviet Union would crumble. When communism dissolved, the Warsaw Pact dissolved with it. After 35 years, the confrontation between East and West in Europe came to an end, and a new Europe emerged.